Hi, so let's just go straight in. So for today's video, we're just going to be doing a short form look at my process for watercolor paintings. So as you can see here, I took a large, fluffy, very soft brush and just took some water across the page and then diluted some very pale yellow. Then I started going in and I've started plotting the shapes of the general shape of the pomegranate with the really pale red tones, because a lot of it's orange, yellow, and red tones. And even though it might have been best to do yellow, there's certain areas that the yellow could have caused problems with if it had mixed with the red. So I actually took the red in instead because it was one of the most predominant colours in this situation. As you can see, by this point I've started filling in with some of the paler yellows and orange tones by just mixing some of the brighter oranges and perhaps some of the darker yellows, so as to get an effect of almost an undertone. I think that the best way to do this was just yet again using a larger brush and getting an even tone across the entire space in which you want it. You can see that I've left certain areas untouched by that colour, for example where I'm now filling in with the pomegranate seeds. It's up to you whether you choose to do this, but I think depending on the effect you're going for, it can be a very valuable thing to do to leave certain areas untouched. As you can see by this point, I've started adding a lot of the details in the red areas such as the pomegranate seeds by doing almost an ombre effect, by doing a lot of dark tones that almost fade inwards towards lighter reds, pinks, yellows, oranges, and highlighted areas of white to create an almost three-dimensional effect. Again here I'm starting to add a lot of the undertones back in by using an almost orangey yellow to add some of the tones of warmth back into the piece around the edges of the pomegranate, around where it sprouts, anything around like that. I just want to add those warm tones back in so it doesn't look too faded or unrealistic. As you can see here, I'm doing the same thing with just a dark brown, giving it a bit more dimension, blending it out. I'd rather get a lot of the base undertones and base work done now and then refine some of the details later on by using some of the darker tones and adding highlights back in by using gouache or something similar. As you can see here, I've started on the second piece of pomegranate, and what you don't realise is off camera I have a little cheat sheet menu of what each individual shade looks like. A lot of the time you can still remember what individual shades and colours you've used. Sometimes it does help if you still make a cheat sheet or have some kind of way to recognise individual colours you've used, because you never know if you're going to have to take a break from a piece at any time and you might not be able to remember what colours you use when you go back to it, because a lot of the time, even if a colour looks similar to what's in your palette, it might not actually be that colour and it might be two colours you've mixed to look similar, because the colour mixed will look different to how the colour it looks in the palette will look. Here I've just been adding some shadows underneath the pomegranates to give the illusion of light hitting the pomegranates and creating a shadowed effect underneath them, so it gives it a bit more dimension. I'm adding some of the juice that's spilled from the pomegranates and shadowing them, giving them a bit more detail. Then you can see I'm just having to reapply the tape because it kept moving everywhere, which will be a big issue, so I recommend that you maybe should try stretching your watercolour paper if you do this. I didn't because I don't tend to like the way it looks when it's stretched, but each to their own. Here you can see I'm adding a lot of the shadows and dark tones back into my pomegranate seeds, just so that it gives it a bit more dimension and life. As you can see by this point, most of the detail has been brought back into the piece and it seems a lot more livelier with a lot of tones and shadow and shape going on. But what I've done now to add some of the highlights back in is I've took some white gouache and a really fine brush and I've just started stippling a lot of little areas of white all across the pomegranate slices on the top to give an effect of almost the juice and the moisture showing up. I feel like it's one of the easiest ways to do something like this is using gouache or acrylic in white to just give that effect of almost hyper-realism. I'd say in this instance I prefer to use gouache because it was a lot similar to watercolour in consistency and such than acrylic would be. However, it's each to their own and it's what you have on hand sometimes.